Yes, so my name is Charles. I'm here to guide you through using ERPNEXT to run your business or your organization as you see fit. So to actually get in ERPNEXT, you can notice that there is a web address here. Now for this web address, we actually have to configure it for you before you can actually have this particular web address. And then it comes with hosting and all of that. So if it's something that you're interested in having or using for your business, we have to work on that for you. It takes less than an hour to get that done, but you must have your own, they call it a URL, more like a website address. If you don't have it, you can actually purchase one for you. All right, so to get in here, you just have to type the web address that we provide. In this case, this is the web address. All right. So when you get in here, you would be greeted with this screen, the login screen. There are two dialog boxes that you must actually fill. We call this the authentication page or the login page. So here you must fill in your email address that we provide for you, and then the password that we provide for you. In this case, it's already filled, so I select it as it's already filled. Now you can also log in with your email link, but this is something that we configure. Sometimes people forget their password, so they want an easier way to get in. You can use the email link, log in with the email, and with the email link, when you click here, a link is sent to your email. So you just open the link and then you get direct access to ERPNEXT without typing in a password. So this is how that particular one works. So let's assume that all these credentials are correct. Let's click login. So you click login to enter. So there you are in. Now, not everybody will be greeted with this screen. If we configure it this way, you'll be greeted with this screen. If it's not configured this way, then it will give you access directly to the software. So you can see that ERPNEXT is the first one. The second one is, they call that Frappe HR, and then the last one is Drive. You won't need this one in this tutorial. So the first one will be ERPNEXT, so we get in. If your system is not configured this way, when you enter your username and password or your email and password, you get direct access to the system in that manner. All right, so here, to get in, now you're in, and then you look at the left side of the screen, you find a menu. We'd actually find a menu, and in the menu you can see home, accounting, buying, selling, stock, assets, HR, manufacturing, quality, projects, support, users, websites, payroll, CRM, tools, ERPNEXT settings, integration, ERPNEXT integrations, and then build. So for today we are only going to consider a few, and then later we can always work on the others. So let's start with the home page. So in the home page you can see all these things here. You see item, customer, supplier, sales invoice, and all. So here they are just quick links to certain things that you can actually do in your organization. Now, in any organization, before you can actually do business, you have to procure something, whether you have to procure a service or you procure a product, or in other words, you have to buy the product from a supplier. So the way ERPNEXT works is that you have to, if in your case you are buying some form of items to resell to a consumer, right? To resell to a consumer or a business, you will have to purchase it. You have to go through the purchasing process from your supplier, and then it goes through the logistics company, and it gets to your business. In some cases, businesses have more than one warehouses, so you actually receive it in the warehouse of choice, right? So in order to start this process, there are a number of options. Here you see in the buying section, you see there's material request, there's purchase order, there's purchase invoice, request for quotation, and then supplier quotation, right? So here, sometimes you can request for quotation from a supplier directly. The supplier wants you need some product from supplier, so you create a quotation and then send it to the supplier, and the supplier would give you a response. So that is when you can actually use a request for quotation. You use purchase order when an order needs to be done. Let's say a quotation has been confirmed. A quotation being confirmed means that the quantities involved and the prices involved have been agreed upon by both parties. So in that case, you don't have to go through the quotation phase. And then you use the purchase invoice when the purchase order has been agreed upon or has been finalized, and that purchase order needs to be paid for. It needs to be paid for. Then you use the purchase invoice. So for some companies, they don't have to go through using the purchase request for quotation or purchase order. They just have to go straight to using the purchase invoice to actually create purchases for the business. In this case, we are going to start with the purchase order, and then the purchase order, we are going to convert the purchase order to a purchase invoice. And then, because I said earlier, when you have a purchase invoice, the purchase invoice has to be paid for. Otherwise, the invoice will be left unpaid. Right. So let's begin by selecting purchase order, assuming that the quantities involved and the prices have been agreed upon by both parties. Let's select purchase order in this instance. So you can see that I have some preset purchase orders here. These are my old purchase orders. Right. So let's click on add purchase order here. Right. So you can tell that. So immediately you can tell that you have this screen. You have these options that you can actually take advantage of. Here, the first one is purchase order series. The purchase order series is just a unique number that is set for each purchase order, so to make every purchase order unique for a particular business. This series can actually be changed. It can actually be configured according to what you actually want. Right? And then you can see here there's a date. Date is when you are actually entering the transaction. Sometimes some transaction takes place before that particular date. It took place earlier, or it will take place in the future. So you can actually click here and then set the date that you believe the transaction took place. The discussions and all of that took place. You can actually use that to select it. And in our case, we are choosing today, which is 11th of February 2025. Now, required by here is actually telling you that you need to set a date that you need a product delivered to you. So the required here actually represents when the product should be sent to you, so sent to your warehouse. And then here is the cost center. Cost center is more like the accounting center that you are actually going to run the business from. Because this particular software has they have this what you call accounting dimensions. So the cost center is where the accounting takes place, right? And then we would go into details with this particular cost center in the future. So you can actually select it, or you can leave it blank. But if you leave it blank, the software will automatically choose this main -F for you, right? And then you have you have a currency. Here we actually configured it to use Ghana cedi. You can decide to use any other currency of choice if you are running the business in Naira or CD, US dollars or Euro or Rand. So you can see there are a number of currencies here, right? So in our case, it's Ghana cedi. If you have US dollar, that's okay. You can actually use it. But when you are using multi-currencies, you have to take care of the exchange rate. The software has this automatic exchange rate calculator that allows you to configure exchange rates. If you are considering running multi-currency accounting in your business, you would have to inform me so we can do the configuration properly. The next one, it says your price list. Select your price list. So in your price list, you can actually create multiple price lists for this business. In our case, you are buying a product. So you can see that I have two price lists configured. The buying for USD, the standard has been misspelled, and then there's buying for Ghana cedi. So you select that, and so what you mean is that you can actually have multiple price lists for any transaction. That's for purchasing, for selling. You can have multiple price lists. That would determine how you actually buy or sell a product. That can be configured later. Now here, it's actually asking you to set the warehouse. So here, from when the item will actually be required, which I didn't say. Let's say the item will be required on Friday, and then so on Friday it is expected that when the order goes through, the item will be delivered to your set warehouse. So in our case, you can choose stores. Now you can see that you have multiple warehouses here. When the software is set up for the first time, software generates at least 5 warehouses. We call them virtual locations actually, but they can be actual locations for the business or virtual locations for the business. When we say virtual, it means that let's give you a scenario where maybe you have these suppliers that give you products to sell, but those products are not they are received in your warehouse, but they are not purchases. They are not things that you actually bought to run the business with. They are not things you buy. You take the product, you sell it, and later you pay them the monies back. You can actually receive those items in your warehouse. The software allows you to receive those items in your warehouse, right? And then, but not as purchases, but as they call that material receipt. So you can actually receive them in your warehouse, and then you store it in any warehouse of choice. In this case, you can actually create a virtual warehouse for that particular transaction. You can actually create a virtual warehouse for that particular transaction, so that warehouse is not a real warehouse, a virtual warehouse. So when you are accounting for the things, you know that if you have 10 items and 2 belongs to that particular supplier, the 2 will not be part of your consignment. The 8 would be, but the 2 wouldn't be. So here in this case, we select set target warehouse. Now here you can see this scan barcode. Scan barcode functionality is when during the creation of your product. By creation means sometimes when you are starting out to use this accounting software, this ERP, you would have to create items. The items that you actually sell or buy in your warehouse, you have to create them one by one. So in that case, I would have to demonstrate how to create an item here, so you'd have an understanding on how that works. So you can see that, and then we would actually insert a barcode. When we insert the barcode, then in the future with the barcode scanner, we can actually scan and pick up items without typing them here. But when you have a barcode scanner, the moment you scan it, the software will pick up the item here on your behalf. You get it? Right. So here, let's create an item. Let's call it maybe test item. So, and then here you click on create a new item. Okay. So when you get here, in order to be able to do the right thing, you have to click edit full form. Right, edit full form. So when you click edit full form, now you are in to where you can actually create an item. Now, the first thing you have to uncheck will be manufacturing, and then you say include item in manufacturing, uncheck that. And then the second one is sales, then uncheck grant commission and make sure allow sales is checked. The reason is that this item is not an item that will be included in your manufacturing setup. And then a sales commission is when you are not actually charging commission on that particular item. By commission, sometimes you have these resellers, and you need to pay them commission for every sale that is done. So when you click on grant commission, the system will calculate the commission and add it to the sales total order, the total order value. When you finalize the transaction, you see that there's a commission is calculated and added to the total value of the transaction that is in question. So here with the item code, you have to ensure that the item code and item name are the same. In some organizations, the item code and the item name are not the same. See, the item code and item name are not the same. They're actually two different things. You get it? They're two different. Some companies prefer to use numbers as the item code, and then others do not decide to. But in our case, to make things easier, make sure you make the item code and item name the same. So when you are looking for them in the system, it's easier. Now with the item group, you can actually create any group of choice. Let's say test, and then you click on create a new group. But when the software is configured for the first time, an item group called product is already configured for you. So if you don't want to go through the process of creating new item, just select products. Alright, now there's this thing called default unit of measure. With this default unit of measure, it is actually talking about the default unit of measure for that particular item. The NOS just means numbers. You see, numbers, that's just what it means. So if you can actually use unit, each, pair, and etc. But we will go with the system default, which is NOS, numbers. All right. Now you can see on the right side that you have this maintain stock, has variants, opening stock, etc. Maintain stock means that you would want the system to keep track of the stock in the organization. If you don't want it to keep track of that stock, you can check it. In that case, when you are counting, when the items are being counted, you won't see a number relating to the item. When you go to your stock section, you're trying to see the quantity left, you won't be able to see it because the software that won't be able to take account of what stock was received and what stock. You can actually know what stock was sold, but you won't be able to know how many left because the software didn't take account of that. In our case, we have to select maintain stock. Now, opening stock is when you are actually counting the quantity of stock that you already have. Some businesses already have products when they actually set up the software, so they would want to capture that particular stock before they buy new ones. So you can set your opening stock if you have any. In our case, we have 0. Evaluation rate actually has to do with the cost of the item. The cost of the item, or how much the item is being valued at. Usually is the cost of the item. And then you have the standard selling rate. Standard selling rate is how much you are willing to sell the item for. So in our case, we will leave the opening stock blank, and then we will leave these sides blank as well, because we have actually not bought the item. So we would want to leave the standard selling rate. Okay, let's enter, let's say 10 CDs will be the standard selling rate. Let's leave it that way, and then let's save it. Now remember, the unit of measure is these units of measures are used when you have variance. The variance is simply different variations of a product. So if you have a t-shirt and you have different colors, you can click here and then you can have multiple colors. If you have different sizes to it, the software can take account of that. That will be done. We will go through this later. You see, when you select it, you have this variant section that is activated. Then click save. The moment you save this, on the right side, right? So now it is saved. Let's open a new tab and try and visit the item in question. Normally in ERPNEXT, when you open it this way, it sends you to this page. To navigate away from the page, you right click on your profile and click on switch to desk, and then you'll be able to navigate away from this page. Now, see, so on this page, if you are looking for any item, just type item. Just type the item name. In our case, it's called test item. Then you enter search. When you enter search, you will be able to. Okay, so let me do it properly. Test item. Okay, we weren't able to find it. So let's type in the item list. Click item list. You can have the list of all the items that you actually created. In our case, the item This item is the first one. So let's open it up. When you open it up, you see on the right side that there is more like a place where you have this change thing. This is where you can actually upload an image for the product. So when we click upload, we have the opportunity to upload whatever we want. And in their case, you can upload from your device, the library within the software, a website link, or a webcam, or a camera. So in our case, let's use our device. That means you're going to upload a picture from our device. Now, let's use this image, this bread image, and let's upload it. Okay. Now, in case that we have uploaded some bread here, in case we want to actually change the name of this bread, in case we want to change, because you notice it's actually an item. In case you want to change the name, you have to click here, this particular side. Then you see that you have item name and item code. You can actually decide to change the name here. Maybe call it bread, and then bread. And then you click on rename. And then the item will be automatically renamed. So down here, you say document renaming from item to bread has been queued. So it won't change right away, to take some time. So you click here, item at the top, and then you come back here and you see that the item, the bread, the name has been changed. The item name has been changed, the ID has also been changed. So now we are dealing with bread as the item. Now in our case, let us delete it because the item name has been changed. And then let's add a row here. So now we have an item called bread. Just type that bread here, and that item will be selected. All right. So now let's assume that from this supplier, we want to buy so quantity of items. Now let's not forget, before you buy from a supplier, you have to actually select a supplier name, or you have to actually have access to a supplier. Now to do that, let us open a new page. And to open a new page, as I explained, you just type the same URL, and then you navigate to this particular page. Let's do it again. Let's type the same address, and then we'll be greeted with so this page. So let's click here and then click switch to desk to access the ERP setup. All right. So now we are in here. Now for us to create a new supplier for our bread, you have to just type in supplier here, and then the first one you'll be greeted will be supplier list. Click supplier list. And then here in supplier list, you can see that we have a whole list of suppliers. You want to add a new supplier, so you click add supplier. Here let's type in the supplier, and let's call it bread supplier. And then let's click edit full form, so we can actually have more options. So here you can see that it's asking if the supplier is actually a supplier type, is actually an individual, a partnership, or a company. So you have to find out if the supplier is actually a business, an individual, or a partnership, or more like a partnership is like two or more people that have set up a business, but it hasn't been registered as a company. Let's assume the supplier you are buying from is an individual, and then you can choose to pick up a supplier group. Supplier group has to do with is he a local supplier, is it a distributor, etc. So let's assume it's a local supplier. And then select the currency that you want to transact with this particular supplier. Let's assume in this case it's Ghana Cedi. And then select the price list that you actually want to deal with. In this case, it's standard buying price list, which will be automatically done for you. If you are paying the supplier through a bank, you can actually click here and then add a bank for that particular supplier. In our case, the supplier will be paid in cash, so we won't need that settings. You can leave all these blank. We would actually revisit these later. Now, here it's asking you to enter the supplier primary address. We won't enter this now. We will enter after we save it. So let's click on save. Now, in ERPNEXT, every item supplier you are actually going to have, or customer can actually have an image. So the image will be used to identify that particular entity. So here, we go to add address and contact. We'll be able to add an address to the supplier that we actually buy from. So let's click add new address. And the address has to do with the location that the supplier is at. So you have to set the address type. In our case, it will be the supplier's office. That's from the location from which the supplier does business with you. And then you can type the name of that location. Let's call it Asylum Down. And then let's say Accra. And let's say Greater Accra. And then we can actually add an email. Let's say test@breadsupplier.com. Remember, this is incorrect. So when you try and send mails with it, you are going to have an error. So this is not going to work because it's actually not a real address. And then the phone number, let's assume that you have a phone number here. If the phone number too is not correct, you won't be able to send SMSs and WhatsApp and Telegram and all. The software can actually do that if it's configured well. So let's assume this is the number. And then let's say this is the preferred billing address and this is the preferred shipping address. We select these two and then we actually save. Alright. So now you have an address and contact. You can actually add a contact here too. The contact is like someone in the organization that you're going to deal with. This is something that is crucial. When dealing with businesses, though we are dealing with the business, we actually deal with individuals within the business. Maybe a purchase order officer, an accountant, a warehouse manager, a sales manager, whoever that we deal with should have an address in the business, in the setup. You can choose to leave this side blank, but it's not advisable. So let's click new contact here. So now you see you are greeted with first name, middle name, last name. So you are actually dealing with an individual. Let's say that the person's name is Joe Smith. That's normally what we use for test. Joe Smith, Andrew. And then here the user ID. You use a user ID when this particular person uses your system. And you know it's possible for a supplier to have access to this particular system, and then for all kinds of things. So in our case, he won't have access to it. And then you keep all these defaults. Let's say the person is male, right? And then the company in question. And then now let's add it. So let's add an email. So test@bread. Let's say joe.smith@breadseller.com. Bread, what is bread supplier.com. Alright. So set this one as your primary source of. Set this as a primary email, and then add another contact. So this is the contact of this particular supplier. So set it as a primary phone, the primary mobile. So here you can actually set these options, and then you see. Now you can see that you have this department thing. You can actually, if you know the department the person works in. Let's say the person works in the let's say the purchases or procurement. So we enter that there, and then for salutation we can go for Mr. And then let's save it. And then so you can see that you have a general address to the business, and then you have an individual's address to the business. So someone you can actually contact in that organization. Now let's say this. Now, so if we type here bread seller, we will actually find bread supplier. We actually find that what we just saved here. So we click bread supplier. So we are now buying this bread from this particular bread supplier. Now let's enter the quantity as 1,000 pieces. Let's say we are buying 1,000 is too much. Let's say we are buying 100 pieces. and each one it will be sold to us for maybe 8 cedis. All right. So if you multiply the 8 pieces by the 8, you have 800 cedis as the total. Now you can actually add taxes here. Let's assume that we had taxes configured. You can actually add your taxes here. That will be done later. So you can have all these taxes. Let's assume that there's VAT. Let's say the VAT is 15%. So the software will calculate 50% and add that to the purchase order. In our case, let's delete it. The feature we will deal with how to use taxes for this particular transaction. All right. So let's actually save it. Now, when you save it, the software will actually save the purchase order in draft mode. You see, so when we come back here, you see that our first order status, purchase order status, is in draft mode. It won't save it as you know in saving. So to change it from draft mode to recorded mode, you have to click here, submit again, and then click. So is that saying, do you want to permanently submit this PURORD 2025002? You say yes. Right. So the moment you do that, you can see that it's saying to receive and bill. Now here you can literally update the quantity that you are looking for. Let's assume that suddenly you change your mind to 120. You can actually change to 120 and update it. So the PO has been moved from 100 to 120. You see, you can actually update the quantity as you see fit. Then let's say you can also change it to 200, and maybe the price was reduced to maybe 750 pesos. Then we actually have that. You see. All right. Now, so in here it says to receive and bill. So since you are actually buying from the supplier, a bill will be created for you, and the supplier will actually have to send it. So the bill is for you, but you are going to also receive stock from the supplier as you actually purchased. So to actually do that, you click on create, and then you have to first, I told you that you have to create a purchase invoice to cover this particular sales order. So let's do that. You can choose not to create a purchase invoice. You can just go ahead and pay for that purchase order, but that's not the correct procedure. So here, when you get here, you don't literally have to change anything. You don't literally have to change it. You can actually update the stock if you wanted to. You see, you can actually update the stock if you wanted to. But in our case, let's leave it that way. And then let's save. And let's submit it. Remember, as I said before, if you save it, the purchase order will be in draft mode. So you have to actually click submit again to permanently submit the ACC PIN 2025. So this is the series number for this particular purchase order. I told you about series numbers when we were starting out. So this particular purchase order is actually invoice, especially unique, because it's actually identified by this unique purchase invoice number. So let's click submit. So you see here that the bread is actually unpaid for. You get it? You see that here, this particular bread that we are buying is unpaid for, but an invoice has been created. So assume that in this particular order, we were paying part of this particular purchase order, because per our agreement with the supplier, we have to pay part, and then when we finish selling, we pay the other. We can actually create a payment against this transaction, or a payment for this particular transaction. So here, the first thing you see is mode of payment. Let's assume that mode of payment was by cash, and then the paid amount. Let's assume that we are paying half of that, which is 750. Right. So we are actually going to owe the supplier 750. So we are paying an allocated amount of 750. You see, if I change this to 800, it will actually change here to 800. Allocated amount will actually change. So let's assume that we are paying 750. All right. So we are paying 750 for this transaction. Right. Now, here we are actually paying with cash. If we are paying with check, the software would request for check or a reference number. In our case, you're going to get that from the check that you are going to give to the supplier. So let's actually save it and submit. Right. So now this payment has actually been made against the supplier's account. Now remember, on this supplier page that we created, you can actually go in there to the supplier dashboard, and then you are going to see what transactions that you have been doing with this particular supplier. So here you can see your purchase order, your purchase invoice, and then your payment entry. If you click the payment entry, say you have one payment entry for this particular supplier. You can see that it's been done here in cash. We can actually open that payment entry and see the payment we actually did against the transaction with this number. So we have 750. Now let's come back here. You can actually see that it's saying you actually owe the supplier 750, as we said that before. So now it's easy for you to know how much you owe each supplier, it's easy for you to know that. So that's actually done. Now when this is done, remember the transaction is not complete. Now the order that you actually made has to be received in your warehouse. So let's go back to the purchase invoice that we created. And to go back, when you click here, it will show the purchase invoice, the latest purchase invoice. So you click there. If you can't find it, you can still type purchase invoice list. When you click it, the latest one will show here. And see that here saying the purchase order from this bread supplier has been partially paid for. It's not fully paid for. You see. So just open it up here, and then you can actually pay for it. Now, ERPNEXT has all these things where you can actually have comments. Let's say you can actually comment on this. Let's say we paid cash for this transaction, but supplier complains of damage notes. Okay. So if you have a team, they are going to see this note and then actually follow up on that. So let's click comment. So we actually have a comment against this transaction. So that means this issue has to be resolved. Now that this particular invoice is actually not unpaid, it's actually partially paid for. So when I refresh it to show that it has been partially paid for, not unpaid. So you just have to refresh it to see the status of the payment. Now let's receive this warehouse. Remember, order has been made and you're supposed to receive it in your warehouse. So click on create purchase receipt. So the purpose of this is to make sure that all that you bought was received in the warehouse that you said will be received in that warehouse. This is very important, so that sometimes not everything is supplied after an order has been made. So in our case, let's assume that the quantity that the supplier brought out of the 150, after 200 was 150. Because for some reason he wasn't able to apply all the 200. So remember, you ordered for 200 and 150 has been supplied for. So you actually will receive 150, and a remainder of 150 will be supplied later. You get it? And the system will take account of that. And here you can actually select the warehouse that you want to receive this 150 out of the 200. So let's save that. So when you click this one, immediately or within a short time, your warehouse will be updated with 150 pieces of this bread, which is very, very nice. So now you can see that if we come to purchase receipt means you bought an item and you received it. The software receives products after the purchase has been done, so that you actually know what you are doing. All right. So here you can see the purchase receipt has been done for this item. Now let us navigate. Let's refresh the page for this particular supplier, and let's see what we have what information we have for this particular supplier. So you see that here we still owe the supplier 50, and then I think the same old information is showing. Alright, now there's a way you can actually know what stock you have in your warehouse. That option, you just type in stock summary here, open stock summary. So when you type in open stock summary, you'll be given access to your warehouses, the items, the item groups, etc. So in our case, for us to find the product we are looking for, we have to select the warehouse and then select the item in question. In our case, this is bread. Okay. So good. So here you can see that in our warehouse we have some bread there, and we have 150 pieces received. The actual quantity is 150. Waiting quantity. Waiting quantity is the quantity that is supposed to be received in our warehouse. You get it? Now you see move and add. Move and add, you can actually click move. Move means you can move items from a particular warehouse to another warehouse easily. You see? So let's say you are moving the item, item, you are moving a set quantity to this particular warehouse. You are moving, let's say, 30 pieces. You move 30, you have 120 left, and 30 will be sent to finished goods. In our case, we do not want to, so we'll leave it that way. Wonderful. So now that the purchase has been received, now let's assume that later the supplier decides that he's going to bring back what is left. For you to do that, you can just visit the purchase receipt section by typing in purchase receipt here. Right. And then you look for the transaction in question, this one, and then click create, and then you have an option to, okay, there's no option to actually receive the rest. For you to do that, you go to the purchase invoice, look for that particular invoice, which is this one, and then click here, purchase receipt, and then the 50 that's left will automatically be picked up here. See, the 50 that's left will automatically picked up, and then maybe the person brought back the 50. Right. Now there's an option. Let me go to the purchase orders and then see if we can. Let's open the purchase orders here. You can actually edit the purchase receipts that we did. Let's take purchase receipt here. So now let's say, so the accepted quantity, let's say the person brought all the 50. You can actually, if the person brought less, you can actually do that. So now let's save this and let's submit.